Snow falls silently through a shattered cathedral window. Luca Moretti sits alone, whiskey in hand, whispering to the shadows, "I killed the only good thing I ever had." The doors creak. A woman in red pushes a stroller forward, stopping 10 feet away. She lays a silenced Glock on the marble and leans close. "They know about the boys, and you're the only one who can save them." 2 storm gray eyes open in the stroller. A tiny voice asks, "Daddy, why did you leave us? Before we begin, where are you watching me from? What's the time where you are right now? Midnight? Early morning? Or maybe the witching hour?" Snow crawled through the shattered rose window like the church itself was breathing out ghosts. St. Agnes Cathedral had been abandoned for years, condemned by the city, forgotten by God, but never by him. Luca Moretti sat alone in the front pew, coat collar turned up against the winter draft, elbows on his knees, head bowed like a man praying but too proud to fold his hands. The only light came from the vigil candles he'd shot at 5 years ago. Half of them still flickered as if afraid to die in his presence. The others had melted into hardened wax stains shaped like bullet wounds. Shadows clung to the columns. The marble smelled of dust, blood from another lifetime, and cold. Luca uncorked a bottle of 1,945 Macallan, the last thing his father ever told him not to touch. He poured the whiskey into a tarnished gold chalice and drank it like communion. The burn hit his throat, his chest, his memory. It didn't help. He pulled a cigarette from his pocket, touched the end to a flame, and inhaled until the cherry glowed red. Smoke curled toward the rafters where the saints had been painted once, before someone set the ceiling ablaze in a shootout he'd won at 21. They never restored it. He liked it better ruined. "It's funny," he said into the emptiness, voice low enough to echo but sharp enough to cut. "I never came here when I was worth saving." He stared at the crucifix above the altar. Christ hung there with his head tilted, staring back at Luca like he knew exactly what kind of monster was sitting in his house. Luca exhaled smoke toward the statue out of pure spite. "Forgive me, Father," he murmured, the words guttural, reluctant. "For I have sinned." Snow rained through the broken window behind him. "I killed the only good thing I ever had." He hadn't planned to say it. His voice betrayed him, cracking around the confession. 5 years of silence, and that was the first sentence he offered to God. 5 years since he'd ruined her. 5 years since the night he became boss and lost everything else worth breathing for. He tilted his head back, letting the snowflakes melt on his skin. He didn't bother wiping them away. They made him look human, and that was a lie he didn't care to maintain tonight. Somewhere deep in the cathedral, wood creaked. Old building, wind, nothing more. He refilled the chalice, drank again. Time slowed, sucked into the heavy black of midnight. His phone lay face down on the pew beside him. Turned off. The entire underworld could have been burning for all he knew. For once, he didn't care. The past had a gravity stronger than bullets, stronger than blood. He was drowning in it now. He closed his eyes, let the cigarette hang from his lip, and listened to the snow hit the marble like soft static. Peaceful, eerie. It was almost enough to fool him into thinking the universe had given him one gentle moment. Almost. The massive cathedral doors groaned. Not the wind this time. The sound shoved cold into his lungs. His eyes snapped open. He didn't reach for his gun, not because he wasn't armed, but because anyone stupid enough to interrupt him in a church deserved to speak before they died. The doors expanded slowly, reluctantly, like they feared who stood behind them. A figure slipped inside. A woman. Tall. Certain. A blood-red coat dusted in snow. The hood framed her face, shadowing it until she stepped into a beam of candlelight. Then he saw her mouth first, the same mouth that had once said his name like a vow, then a curse, and everything inside him turned violent and still at the same time. Isabella Valentino, the only person he'd ever loved. The only person who'd ever walked away with his heart still beating inside her hands. She pushed a double stroller. 2 small bodies slept under heavy blankets, chest rising and falling in perfect sync. Luca went still. Still like a predator before impact. Still like ice before it cracks. He stood slowly, the cigarette dropping from his mouth, hitting the marble with a soft hiss. Isabella's eyes held a storm, the same storm he'd given her. She walked down the aisle, steps steady, even though her breath fogged with panic. She refused to let him see. 10 feet away, she stopped. She slid a silenced Glock from under her coat and placed it on the floor between them, not as surrender, as declaration. Her voice was sharper than the cold. They put a contract on our sons, Luca. Every muscle in his body locked. Our sons. The words detonated inside him. She continued, each syllable an execution. You have until sunrise to make them untouchable. The cathedral went silent. Not empty, suffocating. Luca's heartbeat wasn't fast. It was lethal, controlled, focused. He stepped forward once, and the air tightened like the walls themselves were afraid of what he'd become. His gaze dropped to the stroller. 2 small faces. Black hair. Gray eyes. His eyes. His blood stared back at him from 2 miniature mirrors he never expected to see again. The older one, or maybe the younger. They looked identical, blinked awake. The child studied him with a seriousness no 5-year-old should have. Snowflakes dusted his lashes. He tilted his head, same way Luca did when deciding if someone lived or died. His voice was quiet, curious, devastating. Are you the monster Mommy cries about? Luca didn't breathe. Behind him, the candles flickered like they wanted to run. Isabella's jaw trembled, just once. Answer him. Luca's throat closed around words he didn't know how to shape. He had earned every name people called him. Wolf, king, killer, devil. But monster spoken by his own son? It cracked something in him he didn't know could break. He moved closer instinctively, like gravity was pulling him toward the children he'd forced himself to live without. His hand hovered a few inches above the stroller handle. His fingers trembled for the first time in years. Isabella's voice cut the air cleanly. Don't touch them unless you plan to save them. He turned his head toward her slowly, as if he were afraid sudden movement would shatter the ground beneath them. Her coat dripped melted snow onto the marble. She looked exhausted, cornered, furious but unbroken. She never broke. That had been part of the problem. He stared into her eyes, those same eyes that once held the world he wanted, the world he threw away to keep her alive. Now they held nothing but accusation and desperation sharpened to a blade edge. Who put the contract? He asked, his voice low, thick. She exhaled like she had been waiting for that one question. My father, she whispered. He found out 3 days ago. He signed their death warrants for an alliance with the Bratva. Luca's jaw flexed. His silence shook the air. Isabella took a step closer. She reached into her coat again slowly, purposefully. Luca didn't flinch. He recognized the shape even before it hit the dim candlelight. His ring. The engagement ring he'd given her before he was crowned boss. The ring she'd left him with the night she tried to shoot him and couldn't. The ring stained with his dried blood. She held it between 2 shaking fingers like a threat, like a promise, like a memory she wanted to destroy. Her voice dropped to a razor-thin whisper. There's only one loophole. Moretti blood married to Moretti blood overrides every contract. The old code won't allow a hit on sacred lineage. Snow hissed through the broken window. A gust knocked over a candle. Wax splattered like tears. Isabella lifted the Glock again, this time pointing it at his chest. Marry me tonight, Luca, she said, eyes glinting with fury and desperation. Or I pull this trigger myself and save them the trouble. The twins stared, wide-eyed and confused, sensing danger even if they didn't understand it. Luca's pulse was a calm, deadly drumbeat. He looked at the gun, then at her, then at the children he'd sworn silently, secretly to never endanger. You wouldn't shoot me, he said quietly. Her grip tightened. Try me. Everything froze, candles, snow, air, blood. Then, the youngest twin, or maybe the same one as before, tugged on Isabella's sleeve, eyes fixed on Luca with eerie focus. Mommy, he whispered. If he dies, who kills the monsters? Isabella swallowed hard, breath shaking. Luca stepped forward, slowly, deliberately, closing the last distance between them. But before he could speak, a thunderous crack ripped through the cathedral. not gunfire. The ancient wooden beams overhead groaned violently, shaking loose a sheet of snow and debris. The building itself shuddered like it sensed the war marching toward it. The candles all blew out at once. Darkness swallowed them whole. Isabella's breath hitched. The twins whimpered. Luca reached for her hand, the instinct faster than thought, faster than pride, and the moment their palms touched, the front doors slammed shut with a force that echoed like an omen. Something outside had arrived. Something worse than the snow. Worse than her father. A shadow moved behind the stained glass, massive and deliberate. The twins clung to each other. Isabella raised the gun again. Luca turned toward the doors, eyes cold, voice colder. Whoever that is, they're already dead. The doors begin to buckle inward, as if an army is about to tear its way into the church. The cathedral still trembled from whatever had slammed against the doors, but neither Luca nor Isabella moved. The twins huddled together in the stroller, whispering in a language made of fear and instinct. Isabella's gun stayed trained on Luca's chest, steady as a surgeon's hand, even while her breath shook. But the look in her eyes wasn't about the present threat. It was the past clawing its way up her throat, 5 years of silence she'd buried like a corpse in winter ground. Luca saw it. He felt it. And for the first time since she walked in, he couldn't look away. "Don't," he warned softly, reading the shift in her expression. "Not now." She ignored him. "You know the last time I was in a church like this?" she whispered, voice thin but lethal. The priest was blessing an empty coffin. His jaw tightened. She hit the target with surgical precision. "Tell me something, Luca," she said. "Did it feel like protection when you shoved a death certificate into my hands?" Snow hissed through the broken window behind them. The cold made her cheeks flush, or maybe it was rage. He didn't answer. So she kept going, slicing deeper. "5 years ago," she said, "I found out I was pregnant on the same night you became Capo dei Capi, the same night you crowned yourself King of Graves." He knew exactly where she was heading, but the truth was, a beast once unleashed, it wouldn't fit back in the cage. "I told you," she said. "You stood there with blood on your face, bruises on your knuckles, men kneeling to you, and I told you we were going to have a child." Her throat bobbed. "And you walked away from me." He hadn't walked. He'd run straight into hell, dragging her safety behind him like a corpse he refused to bury. But she wasn't done. "You didn't argue, didn't ask whose it was, didn't ask how far along." She laughed, a sound edged with something cracked. "All you said was, 'Pack a bag,'" he remembered. Every syllable of that night was carved into him like a scar. Flashback hit him so hard the present blurred. The Moretti compound was burning that night. The old Don, his uncle, was lying in a pool of his own blood. Gunpowder choked the air. Men were screaming the oath to him, calling him boss, king, wolf. And she stood in the doorway of his office, hand on her stomach, eyes huge with something fragile and holy he didn't deserve. "I'm pregnant." He didn't kiss her. He didn't touch her. He walked past her to the safe, pulled out an envelope of cash and a passport, stuffed them into her coat, grabbed her shoulders and shoved her toward the car waiting in the alley. She kept saying his name, shaking, begging for one reason, one why he wasn't looking at her, why he wouldn't even breathe near her, because he'd just taken the throne, and every man gunning for him would go through her first. "Get on the plane," he told her. "Luca, listen. Get on the plane or I'll drag you onto it." She fought him. She punched him. She clawed his face and demanded he look at her like a man who loved her. So he did. He looked at her one last time, long enough to memorize what he was about to lose. "I'm already dead," he told her. "If you stay, you die with me." Then he called the Underworld. Every Don, every lieutenant, every man hungry for power. And he told them the woman he loved had betrayed him. It was the only way to keep her alive. In the flashback, her scream still echoed. Back in the present, Isabella's voice snapped the memory in half. "You made me bury an empty coffin," she said. "I stood over a grave with your name carved into stone while you were breathing in New York. I gave speeches. I cried on command. I put dirt over nothing because you told the world I betrayed you." The words hit harder than any bullet ever had. "You let me hate you," she whispered. "You made it easy." A small sound came from the stroller, one of the boys shifting in his sleep. It broke the rhythm of pain curling between them, but didn't ease it. Luca swallowed the truth that had poisoned him for years. He'd rather she hate him alive than love him dead. Isabella wiped her cheek quickly, like she refused to let a tear survive on her skin. "But I didn't disappear," she said. "I rebuilt myself. I raised them alone. I made sure no one knew what blood ran through their veins." Her eyes locked on his, blazing. "And for 5 years I prayed your world would stay out of ours." She shook her head slowly, bitterly. "3 days ago, my father found out." The confession froze the air again. Don Salvatore Valentino. Old school, ruthless, loyal only to power. The man who hated Luca more than he hated the Russians. The man who now held their sons' lives like bargaining chips. "He wants peace with the Bratva," she said, fury tightening every syllable. To buy it, he offered them a gift, Moretti heirs. "My sons." Her voice trembled. "Your sons." The cathedral seemed to shrink around them, walls closing in. "No Bratva alliance is sealed without blood," she continued, "and the old traditions still hold. A promise like that, it's considered currency. Once given, it can't be taken back without spilling bodies." Luca's hands curled into fists. "He won't touch them." Her laugh was sharp, hollow. "He already has them marked for death before Epiphany. He signed the order. It's done." The words didn't just land, they detonated. But she wasn't finished. "There's one way out," she said. "One loophole your precious commission still considers sacred." He didn't speak. He didn't breathe. He already knew. "Marriage," she said. "Not to any Moretti. To you." She stepped forward and reached inside her coat. When she pulled her hand out, she held the small velvet box he never expected to see again. The engagement ring. The same one she wore the night she tried to shoot him and couldn't pull the trigger. It was still stained with his blood. She held it like a scalpel designed to carve him open. "The contract doesn't apply to a legitimate wife," she said. "Once I'm tied to you, our sons fall under the old protection. Moretti blood married to Moretti blood is untouchable. No alliance can override it, not even my father's." Luca stared at the ring, the symbol of a life he abandoned to keep her alive. His past stared back at him in cold metal and dried blood. But Isabella didn't give him space to think. She lifted the silenced Glock again, raised it with both hands, and pointed it directly at his heart, not like someone bluffing, but like someone who had already accepted consequences. Her voice cut deeper than her aim. "Marry me tonight, Luca." 1 breath. 2. Then she hardened her grip, her finger brushing the trigger. "Or I end this myself," she whispered, "and save them the trouble." The gun didn't shake. Her eyes didn't blink. Her resolve didn't crack. The threat in her voice wasn't for herself. It was for the twins, for their survival. The church fell into dead silence. Snow drifted in. The candles flickered like gasping lungs. Somewhere outside, something growled the world, closing in on them from every direction. But inside the cathedral, there were only 4 hearts beating, and one decision that could rewrite all of them. Luca took a step forward, slow, deliberate. Isabella didn't lower the gun. He didn't ask her to. He looked her straight in the eyes, the woman he had saved by destroying, the woman he had lost by loving. Then, a metallic click echoed through the church. Not from her gun. From the doors. Someone on the other side was unlocking the chains, breaking them. Entering. The doors creaked open, and 12 masked Bratva soldiers stepped into the cathedral, guns raised, one of them shouting in Russian, "The children belong to us." The church doors had barely stopped rattling from the Bratva intrusion when Luca grabbed Isabella's wrist and pulled her behind the nearest marble column. He wasn't retreating. He was calculating, sharpening the next move like a blade. The masked soldiers scanned the pews, their rifles sweeping the shadows where only saints used to stand. They spread out with military precision, boots crunching over fallen plaster and melted candle wax. Isabella inhaled sharply. Luca squeezed her hand once silent command, "Don't speak." He stepped forward into the flickering candlelight like he'd been carved from it, gun drawn, jaw clenched. The Bratva leader raised his weapon. "Moretti," he barked. "We need the children." Luca smiled without warmth. "You're in God's house. Try asking nicely." The leader didn't get the chance to respond. Luca fired first. 2 headshots. 1 chest. The echo shattered what glass still remained in the cathedral. The remaining soldiers dove for cover. Isabella dragged the stroller behind the nearest pillar, shielding the twins with her coat while she reloaded with shaking hands. Luca moved like a shadow that had decided to kill its owner, precise, silent, unstoppable. The firefight lasted 40 seconds. 14 rounds. 3 bodies hit the marble before the rest fled through the side exit, dragging their wounded. The doors slammed shut behind them, leaving a ringing quiet, the kind that follows violence like an afterthought. Luca didn't chase them. He wasn't stupid. They weren't the real threat. He holstered his weapon and turned to Isabella. "We don't have time." She nodded, breath uneven. "The marriage." "I know," he cut in. "We do it now." He reached for his phone, turned it on, and dialed a number that hadn't been used in 6 years. The call rang once. An old, gravelly voice answered. "This better be the devil calling to say he's surrendering." "Close," Luca said. "It's Moretti. I need a wedding." A stunned pause. You're kidding." Luca cocked the gun he was holding. "Domenico, listen carefully. You owe me for 09. You remember the Albanians? I dragged your holy ass out from under their machetes. It's time to pay that debt." "I'm 82. "You can still hold a Bible. Get here. Now? 10 minutes. The priest sputtered. "You expect me to run?" "No," Luca said. "I expect you not to die. Those are your options." He hung up. Isabella stared at him. "You just threatened a priest." "I threatened someone who likes breathing." "Same thing." He lifted the stroller handles and pushed the twins deeper into the cathedral, toward the back corridor where the crypt stairs hid beneath a carved stone arch. The lights flickered overhead, either from the aging wiring or the creeping doom making its way toward them. Hard to tell. Isabella followed close behind, nerves taut. "Your underbosses, can they be trusted?" "They've died for me before," Luca said simply. "They'll do it again." "That's not what I asked." He stopped mid-step, turned to her, and answered with brutal honesty. "If any of them even looks at the boys wrong, I'll put them in the ground myself." She swallowed, something fragile flickering behind her eyes. They reached the iron gate leading down to the crypt. Luca shoved it open with his shoulder. The hinges screamed like they resented being dragged back into a life of sin. The stairwell descended into cold stone darkness. He motioned for Isabella to go first. She shook her head. "The twins. I'll carry them," he said. "No." Her eyes hardened. "You will not carry them until the vows bind them to you. Until then, they stay in my hands." It stung, but he didn't argue. She lifted Matteo and Gabriel out of the stroller, one on each hip, holding them the way someone holds the only thing that makes life tolerable. As she started down the stairs, the boys blinked awake. Their identical gray eyes adjusted to the dimness, studying Luca with unnerving intelligence for children their age. Halfway down, Matteo spoke soft, curious, blunt enough to slice through bone. "Mommy said you were dead." Gabriel nodded solemnly, backing up the statement like a lawyer presenting evidence. Matteo tilted his head, examining Luca's face. "You don't look dead." Isabella closed her eyes for one agonizing second. Luca didn't look away from the boys. "No," he said, voice low. "I'm not dead." Matteo frowned. "Mommy said you died because of monsters." Luca stepped down another stair, closer to them. "I killed the monsters." Gabriel blinked slowly. "Then why did Mommy cry?" A blow to the ribs would have hurt less. Isabella opened her mouth. But Luca raised a hand lightly, not to silence her, but to say, "I'll take this one." "Because," he said, "sometimes the man who kills the monsters turns into one." The boys stared at him, absorbing the words like scripture. Isabella exhaled, shaky and raw. She shifted the boys in her arms and descended the final stairs. At the bottom, the crypt waited like the belly of a sleeping beast, torchlight flickering across stone tombs, old relics, and carved angels with broken wings. Father Domenico arrived through the opposite corridor a moment later, panting, holding a half-buttoned cassock and a silver cross that looked older than judgment. "Luca," he wheezed, "if God wanted this union, he'd have sent an invitation, not a gun." Luca stepped close, the muzzle brushing the old priest's coat. "The vows, now," Domenico huffed. "Fine, fine. But marriages under commission code require witnesses of rank." "They're coming," Luca said. "They'll be here before the vows end." Isabella shifted uncomfortably. "There's something you should know." Luca looked at her sharply. "What? The old laws? They're strict." She swallowed. "Once vows are spoken, the marriage must be sealed physically and witnessed, or it doesn't count. The contract on the boys would remain active." Father Domenico froze mid-sign of the cross. "Absolutely not. Not in a church. Not under my roof." "It's the only way," Isabella cut in, voice cold with necessity. Domenico glared at Luca. "This is blasphemy." Luca's glare was colder. "So is killing children." The priest muttered something in rapid Italian that probably begged several saints to intervene. Isabella laid the twins down on a soft folded cloth atop a sealed stone sarcophagus. They curled into each other, whispering in sleep. Luca's underbosses arrived moments later. Enzo and Rocco, faces grim, weapons holstered but ready. They bowed their heads respectfully toward Isabella and avoided looking at the twins too long. Smart men. Men who wanted to live. Domenico began arranging a makeshift altar from an old marble slab. He lit 3 candles, muttering prayers through clenched teeth. "Stand together," he instructed. Luca and Isabella stepped into the ring of candlelight. Their shadows merged on the stone floor like long, tangled scars. Domenico opened the Bible. "We gather here reluctantly and under duress, to..." The rest of his words drowned under a thunderous crack from above. Dust rained from the ceiling. The crypt walls shook. A distant metal hinge screamed like it was being torn out of stone. Isabella froze. "What was that?" Luca's hand moved to his gun. "Not the priest. Not my men." Enzo looked up the stairwell. "Boss, someone else is in the cathedral." Another boom. Closer. Rocco swore, backing toward the twins. "They're blowing the doors off." Domenico made the sign of the cross so fast he nearly sprained his wrist. Luca positioned himself between the stairwell and his family. The boys stirred in their sleep. Then, the world above them detonated. The cathedral shook from foundation to steeple. Dust fell like ash. The torches flickered violently as the stone corridor filled with the roar of splintering wood. And then it happened. The church doors exploded inward. Boots thundered across the shattered nave. Gunmetal glinted in the torchlight as shadows swarmed the upper stairs. Shouts erupted in Russian, raw, furious, victorious. 12 masked Bratva soldiers flooded the entrance to the crypt like a wave of death. Weapons raised. Voices unified. "The wedding is canceled." "The children come with us now!" The Bratva soldiers stormed in like a pack of wolves on fire, teeth bared, guns leveled. Dust and shards of marble rained from the cathedral ceiling. The twins cried out instinctively, and Isabella's hand tightened around her pistol. Luca didn't hesitate. His body moved before thought. Years of instinct, brutality, and survival compressed into a single, fluid motion. The first soldier rounded the corner. Luca's fist met his jaw. Bone shattered. The man crumpled. Luca twisted midair, catching the second with the butt of his gun before it could swing. 3 more charged from the steps above. He ducked, rolling across the slick marble floor. He kicked one into the altar, snapping the man's leg. Another raised his rifle. Luca's hand shot up, fingers gripping the barrel. The man's head collided with a pew, unconscious before he hit the floor. Gunfire erupted from the stairs. The twin stroller was in the center of his shield, body crouched over it. Bullets ricocheted, sparks flew. Luca's ears rang. One shot glanced off the marble near his hand. He didn't flinch. The first 6 soldiers lay motionless. The 7th aimed his automatic at Isabella. Luca's elbow connected with the man's temple. 8 down, 8 in under 60 seconds. Marble floors were painted with the red of life, other men's, not theirs. Blood pooled in cracks and seams like the cathedral itself wept. Isabella stood over the stroller, gun raised, hands shaking but steady in the chaos. 2 Bratva soldiers had survived, retreating behind the pillars. She fired. One fell, the other hit his knees, pleading through a mask. The final bullet made its mark. Silence fell. Only the twins' muffled whimpers and the slow drip of blood onto marble remained. Luca's chest heaved. The adrenaline surge left him cold in its aftermath. His hands, still gripping weapons, were smeared red, not his own blood, not yet, but the reminder that protection had a price. Father Domenico trembled at the makeshift altar, holding the Bible with quivering hands. Candlelight reflected off his lined face. You survived," he whispered, voice cracking. "God help us all." Luca glanced at him. "You're alive. That's enough for now." The priest swallowed and straightened. His hands shook violently, but he began to speak the vows. "Do you take this woman?" Isabella's lips were pale but firm. She took Luca's hand. The old ring, once stained in blood, gleamed after she cleaned it under the flickering candles. Luca reached into his coat pocket. Years of carrying it, hidden from the world, safe from everyone except himself, were revealed in a single motion. A black titanium band, no decoration, no mercy. He placed it on her finger, heavy and deliberate. A lifetime of promises, betrayals, and survival bound into the cold metal. Father Domenico's voice quavered. "Do you, Luca Moretti, take this woman?" Luca's eyes locked on Isabella's, and for a single heartbeat, the cathedral froze. The only sounds were the twins breathing and the faint crack of dying candles. "In vita mia, in morte mia, con ogni goccia di sangue nelle mi ven," Luca said in Sicilian. His voice was a knife, sharp, unyielding, final. "With my life, with my death, with every drop of blood in my veins." Isabella's lips curved faintly. A breathless nod. The priest lowered his voice for the final blessing. Then, by the power vested in me, Luca's gaze never left hers. His hand was iron, his presence lethal. This was no ordinary marriage. This was survival. This was blood binding blood. He kissed her lightly at first, ceremonial. Then, with hunger, with desperation, with the weight of 5 years of absence and hate and love compressed into a single gesture. The twins stirred, sensing the tension, clinging to each other. Their eyes flicked between their parents, trying to understand the sudden calm after the storm. The cathedral felt sacred again for the briefest instant. Their bodies and souls aligned, if only for a heartbeat. Then the phones went off. Every single one. Lights exploded across the marble pews, screens illuminating the blood and shadows in blinding uniform brightness. One message, repeated on every screen, every device, every locked phone in the church. "You have the girl. I still have the boy's location. Midnight mass is over. War begins now." Luca's jaw flexed, a muscle tensed, the air thickened. Every man in the world who still drew breath knew the balance had tipped. Isabella's hand tightened around his. The priest's Bible trembled in his grip. The twins cried softly, sensing the storm before it arrived. Luca's eyes scanned the cathedral. Every bullet, every corpse, every drop of blood had taught him this lesson. Survival was temporary. The real war was only beginning. His lips pressed once more to Isabella's forehead, whispered, cold, lethal, "Keep them close. Everything else, I will fix." The flickering candlelight cast monstrous shadows on the walls. Saints and sinners alike looked down on the scene, silent witnesses to a massacre sanctified by vows and vengeance. Outside, the city's winter night waited, unaware of the storm poised to strike. Luca's hand slid to the black titanium band on her finger. The weight was more than metal, it was promise, threat, life, death, all in one small circle. The twins huddled closer to Isabella, the soft cries turned into whispered fears. "Is it over?" Matteo asked. "Not even close," Luca muttered under his breath, eyes narrowing toward the shattered doors. From somewhere beyond the church walls, the faint hum of engines and the shuffle of men in boots could be heard. The Bratva wouldn't forget this. Not the dead, not the living, not the man who had just married in a cathedral painted in blood. Every shadow was a threat, every second a countdown. The message on the phones burned in their minds. War wasn't coming. War was already here. And Luca Moretti didn't negotiate. He destroyed. He looked at Isabella, voice low and iron. "Prepare yourself. They know where the boys are, and they're coming for them." Her eyes, fierce, cold, and unwilling to flinch, met his. "Then we fight. Together." A single shot rang out from the streets outside the cathedral. Not aimed at them. Not yet. But it was a warning. The twins whimpered. The priest's hands shook. Candles guttered. Luca's lips pressed to the twins' foreheads. "You will not die tonight," he whispered, voice lethal, calm, and unyielding. But the phones lit up again. New messages, coordinates, timestamps, threats, every one from Don Salvatore himself. The cathedral, once a haven, became a battlefield. Every heartbeat thumped like a drum of war. And as Luca's eyes scanned the screens, calculating, planning, the final piece of the nightmare fell into place. The world outside was waiting to burn, and the first strike had already been sent. Every phone in the church erupted again. New message from Don Salvatore. "You have the girl. I still have the boy's location. Midnight mass is over. War begins now." The crypt wasn't meant for the living. The air was still as entombed saints and colder than the stone columns supporting the cathedral above. Candle flames shivered whenever Luca or Isabella breathed, throwing jagged shadows across ancient bones stacked behind iron bars. The place felt like a vow carved in marble. Nothing left this room the same way it entered. At the doorway stood Luca's underboss and consigliere, two men who'd seen Luca butcher half of Manhattan's underworld, but tonight they wouldn't look him in the eye. Their faces were stone masks. They knew the code. They knew what this room demanded, and neither dared question it. The door groaned shut behind Luca and Isabella, sealing them inside. Isabella walked first, dropping her hand to a passing candle to let hot wax spill onto her palm. She didn't flinch. She didn't slow. She was burning off hesitation, clearing herself of anything that might soften what had to happen. When she turned, her eyes were steady, sharp, carved from the same iron resolve she'd shown when she walked into the cathedral hours earlier. "This is where it has to happen," she said, voice low enough to blend with the flicker of candlelight. "No witnesses except the ones waiting outside. No loopholes, no mercy." Luca didn't answer. He didn't need to. His eyes traced the circle of candles arranged around the stone altar, the place where centuries of blood oaths had been sworn. The Moretti crest was carved into the pedestal, his ancestors watching, judging, demanding. Isabella stepped closer, closing the last inches between them. Her breath brushed his jaw, warm against the crypt's cold. "Make it hurt," she whispered. "I want to remember why I hate you." It hit him harder than a bullet. Not the words, the truth inside them. Her hate wasn't clean, it wasn't pure, it wasn't even fully hate, and that made it lethal. He reached up, brushing his thumb briefly along her cheek, and she slapped his hand away hard enough to sting bone. "Don't touch me unless you mean it," she snapped. "You ruined everything 5 years ago. Don't pretend this is anything but survival." She was wrong, but he let the lie stand. Anything else would break her. What followed wasn't soft, wasn't gentle, wasn't meant for fairy tales or candlelit romance. It was raw impact, two people colliding with 5 years of silence, grief, murder, exile, desire, rage, and unfinished business tearing through both of them like shrapnel. They weren't making love. They were burning through every wound they'd left in each other. She pushed him back against the cold stone, fingers digging into his shoulders, claiming him with a fury born of every night she'd raised their sons alone. He caught her, held her, matched every ounce of fire she threw at him. It wasn't tenderness, it was survival, the kind that leaves teeth marks. At one point, her mouth found the curve of his shoulder and she bit down, not gently, not symbolically, but with enough force to draw a sharp shock of pain from his throat. He didn't pull away. He wouldn't. Not from her. Not tonight. Blood touched her tongue. She froze, just for a heartbeat. Then she whispered against his skin, voice trembling with something closer to truth than she wanted to admit. "I hate you for making me love you." He swallowed hard, hands tightening at her waist. His forehead dropped to hers, breath harsh, ragged, real. "I never stopped living the day you left," he whispered. "I've been a ghost since, and you know it." That broke something in her. Not enough to make her step back, but enough to change the way her fingers curled into his shirt, less claw, more anchor. Minutes stretched into something outside of time, part violence, part confession, part surrender neither of them would name. The candles burned lower. The crypt breathed with them. Old ghosts watched and judged and approved. And when it was done, when the code was fulfilled and the world above them shifted irreversibly, they stood there in the dim light, chests heaving, sweat cooling on skin, the weight of their new marriage settling like a crown made of razors. Isabella was the first to move. She pushed off the stone pedestal, straightening her clothes, wiping a smear of wax from her palm. Her hair was mussed, cheek flushed, lips swollen from where Luca's teeth had grazed it. But her spine was straight, her pulse steady, her eyes fierce. And Luca, shirt torn, shoulder bleeding lightly where her bite had marked him, looked more alive than he had in 5 years. "Let's go upstairs," she said, voice steel. "We finish the rest of this nightmare." The door opened. The witnesses stepped aside without a word. The cathedral above felt different, too quiet, too still, too wrong. The stroller was empty. Luca reached it first, hand gripping the handle so hard the metal groaned. Isabella's breath hitched behind him. Matteo's blanket was still there, folded neatly. Gabriel's little shoe lay on the altar steps, turned on its side like a dropped secret. It took Isabella 1 second to recognize the shoe. It took Luca half a second. And then every candle in the cathedral flickered at once as the big screen behind the altar lit up. A video call was connecting. Luca's jaw locked. Isabella's heart slammed against her ribs. The screen flashed static, then clarity. Don Salvatore stood in the center of the Valentino compound, snow drifting behind him like ash. His hand gripped each boy's shoulder. The twins were pale, terrified, eyes wide with the realization that their world had finally snapped in half. Salvatore smiled like a man giving a sermon. "Bring me my daughter," he said calmly. "By 4 a.m., alone." He tilted the gun so the barrel rested against Matteo's small chest. "Or they die on live stream for the whole underworld to see." The call ended. The cathedral lights went out, and the cliffhanger crashed like a guillotine. Luca's voice, low and murderous in the dark. "No one touches my sons and sees sunrise." Luca sat in the cathedral pew for 1 heartbeat, letting the darkness settle over him like a cloak. The words on every phone, the image of his sons, the fear in Isabella's eyes, none of it surprised him. He had been expecting this. Protocol Lazarus wasn't a bluff. It had waited 5 years for this exact moment, sleeping under the surface of every loyal Moretti soldier, every hidden sniper, every man whose life he had spared with a purpose. And now, like a predator released from shadow, it stirred. "Isabella," he said quietly, voice low enough to carry over only to her. "They think they can bait me. They think they can trade you. They've played the wrong wolf tonight." She looked at him, pale but defiant. "Then let's end it. Together." He nodded, a single motion. No hesitation, no fear, only precision and the cold calculation of a man who had watched thousands die and knew how to make it count. The cathedral doors shuddered as outside. More than 100 loyal Moretti operatives assembled, moving like ghosts across rooftops, alleyways, hidden entrances. Guns were loaded, vehicles positioned, routes planned with military perfection. Protocol Lazarus was live. Luca stepped outside. The night was sharp with cold. Snow-slicked streets reflected the red and blue of distant sirens, though the police were irrelevant here. Their rules didn't apply to this war. A Maybach idled silently in the shadows, engine humming low, bulletproof, armored like a fortress on wheels. He opened the rear door and gestured for Isabella to enter. She hesitated, then slid in beside him, twins' empty car seats looming behind them like ghosts of what had been stolen. "Do you want to wait?" he asked, hands on the wheel, eyes scanning every angle, every shadow. She shook her head. "No, I'm done waiting. I'm done hiding. We finish this tonight." The Maybach rolled into the streets, silent except for the tires on wet asphalt. Luca's eyes were fixed ahead, calculating every traffic light, every potential ambush. Isabella sat rigid beside him, finger brushing the seatbelt, teeth clenched, heart hammering. The city around them was alive with danger. Protocol Lazarus had already begun. Moretti soldiers emerged from shadows, stopping Bratva foot soldiers before they could strike, taking them out quietly, efficiently, leaving bodies that would never be traced. Every rooftop had a sniper. Every alleyway had a man with a rifle. Every fire escape had someone ready to descend. They moved like a hive, a predator pack that responded to a single command. And Luca was the wolf at the center. Inside the Maybach, silence reigned. The only sound was the twins' empty car seats, swaying with the turns of the vehicle. They were ghosts, but reminders. Reminders that nothing, not even a war, could erase. Isabella leaned close to Luca. "If this goes wrong," she whispered. He shook his head. "It won't go wrong." His eyes didn't leave the street ahead. "I've already lost enough. Tonight I win everything back, or die trying." The Maybach slipped through the streets, past abandoned warehouses and silent streets, past scattered lights reflecting the chaos of a city awakening to war. The Bratva were trying to mobilize, but every movement they made was anticipated. Luca triggered the hidden communications on the car's console. "All units, protocol, Lazarus active, engage only as required, no mistakes, protect the target." Outside, loyal soldiers took positions. Bratva vehicles were intercepted before they could reach the mansion. Every alleyway became a choke point, every rooftop a fortress. The city became a chessboard, and every piece moved at Luca's command. Isabella's hands tightened around the seat. "Do they know?" "They know, but they don't know me." He tapped the dashboard. "They don't know the wolf is awake." The streets narrowed. The mansion loomed ahead. Gates tall and foreboding, snow glinting like shards of glass under the moonlight. The first lights flickered from the Valentino property, guards assembling, unaware of the storm approaching. Luca slowed the car, eyes narrowed. The gates were only a few hundred feet away. He killed the engine and let the car drift silently. The world around them was tense, waiting. Isabella's voice was a whisper. "It's all or nothing now." Luca's hand brushed hers for a brief second. "Exactly. No one survives this unscathed. Not him, not us, not anyone who thinks they can touch my family." The gates loomed closer. Every detail was visible now, snowflakes melting on the iron bars, a guard shifting uneasily, the silhouette of men moving behind the windows. The compound was too quiet, almost too perfect. Then, the gates opened. Salvatore stepped out, hands holding the twins, smiling, calm, cold, menacing, the image of control. The boys were alive, yes, but each wore a tiny vest with blinking red lights, the cruelest precision of a father who had no morals left. Isabella gasped. "No." Luca's jaw clenched. Fingers gripped the wheel so hard metal creaked. Snowflakes fell onto the hood, dusting the car with an eerie white calm that hid the chaos ready to explode. The twins looked at their parents, wide-eyed and frozen, unable to understand the stakes, but sensing the fear, the tension, the inevitability of what was coming. Salvatore's lips curled into a smile. "You came, exactly as expected." Luca's eyes burned through the windshield. "Let them go," he said, voice low and lethal. "One move, one breath, one finger, your choice." Salvatore laughed. a sound that made the night colder, sharper. "I think you'll find the choice is mine." The mansion gates closed behind him. Every shadow in the property could be a soldier. Every movement could trigger disaster. Isabella leaned forward, fists clenched on the dash. "What now?" Luca didn't answer. He shifted the car into gear. The storm of Protocol Lazarus was waiting outside. The world had narrowed to the driveway, the mansion, the twins, and the threat in front of them. And Luca Moretti wasn't a man who ran from impossible odds. He pressed his foot down. Tires screeched softly on wet asphalt. Snow whipped against the windshield. Every loyal soldier in New York was moving. Every Bratva operative was about to regret crossing him. And then, as they approached the gates, the flashing red of the twins' vests reflected in Luca's eyes. The final thought before chaos erupted. "They want my sons. They just invited the wolf to a slaughter." Salvatore stands in the driveway, holding the twins' hands. The boys are strapped with blinking explosive vests. Luca and Isabella face them in the Maybach, engine idling, every loyal soldier in position. The night has turned into a battlefield. The air outside the Maybach was knife cold, the kind that cut through coats and skin and straight into bone. Snow drifted sideways across the driveway of the Valentino estate, illuminated by the mansion's floodlights. The twins stood in the center of it all, small figures swallowed by winter, blinking red lights pulsing against their chests with cruel mechanical rhythm. Luca pushed open the car door slowly, deliberately. No weapons, no backup in his hands. Just himself. Salvatore noticed immediately. A smirk curled his weathered mouth. "Bold," he drawled, "or suicidal." Luca didn't answer. He stepped into the snow, each footprint sinking deep, heavy with a weight no one else in the world could measure. Isabella reached out instinctively, but he lifted one hand without turning. "Stop, stay, trust me." The twins stared at him, Matteo, with wide, confused eyes, Gabriel clutching his brother's sleeve like he was trying to hold the world together. Salvatore's guards watched, with rifles raised, waiting for the smallest excuse to kill the most dangerous man they'd ever faced. And then Luca did something no one expected. He dropped to his knees, right there, in front of his sons, in front of his enemy, in front of the entire underworld watching from shadows and rooftops and waiting vantage points. Isabella's breath caught. Salvatore's smirk faltered. The twins froze. Luca looked up at Matteo and Gabriel, his voice steady but softer than it had been in years, maybe decades. "I'm your real daddy," he said, snow melting on his eyelashes. "And I came to take you home." Matteo blinked, eyes flickering to the lights ticking on his vest. "Will it hurt?" he whispered. For the first time since he became boss, Luca's voice broke, barely, but enough. "Not while I'm breathing," he said. Even Salvatore's guards hesitated. The old man himself frowned, shifting his weight as if trying to read a language he'd never learned. Weakness? Sincerity? Or something in between? Luca raised his hand slowly. "You press that button," he said, "and we all die." Salvatore lifted the detonator in his hand, smirking again. "Then kneeling won't save anyone. You forget who taught you half the tricks you use." Luca tilted his wrist. Just barely. The cufflink caught the floodlight just long enough for Salvatore to see the microswitch embedded inside. A mirrored signal, a dead man's trigger. Salvatore's eyes widened. "Try me," Luca said quietly. "If you press yours, mine fires too. We die together, you, me, and the legacy you think you're protecting." The driveway froze. Guards glanced at each other. No one dared exhale too loudly. Snowflakes drifted downward with exaggerated slowness, like even gravity was afraid to step too close. Salvatore snarled. "You wouldn't—" "You don't know me anymore," Luca cut in. "And that's the worst mistake you've ever made." For a moment, the entire estate balanced on the edge of two tiny blinking vests and two men willing to die for very different reasons. Then Isabella stepped forward. No hesitation. No plea. No softness left in her at all. She walked through the soldiers, through the snow, through the impossible tension, and stopped behind her father. She drew the silenced Glock with a single fluid motion and pressed it to his temple. not shaking, not emotional, cold. "Let my sons go," she said, her voice a razor's edge, "or I paint the snow with your brains on Christmas morning." Salvatore didn't move. Not because he wasn't afraid, because he had never expected this moment. The daughter he'd raised in blood and tradition now stood ready to destroy him without blinking. "You don't have it in you," he whispered. Isabella's thumb steadied on the safety. "You don't know me anymore either." For a long second, no one breathed. Then, slowly, reluctantly, with a snarl that sounded more animal than human, Salvatore released his grip on the twins' shoulders. Matteo ran to Luca instantly. Gabriel followed, stumbling through snow in panic, arms outstretched. Luca rose from his knees and pulled them both close, burying his face in their hair for one shattered heartbeat. Their fear, their warmth, their trust hit him like a blow. He had them. He finally had them. But the war wasn't over. Salvatore leaned in, body stiff, expression carved from hate and something darker. "You win the children," he whispered, voice barely audible over the wind, "but you still lose the war." Luca didn't react. Not yet. Salvatore's eyes glinted with something crueler than the detonator. "Look up," he murmured. Luca's head snapped up. A single red dot, cold, sharp, precise, rested on Isabella's forehead. The night sky above Manhattan was a frozen black canvas, pierced by distant lights and the faint glow of burning street lamps. Snow fell thick and relentless, layering the streets in silence that felt both holy and deadly. The Valentino compound stretched before them, dark windows flickering with the occasional shadow of armed men, oblivious to the storm that had already begun in the city. Luca sat in the driver's seat of the Maybach, engine off, eyes narrowed, hands still on the wheel. Isabella gripped his forearm, knuckles white, silent. Behind them, the twins stirred, aware of the tension, gripping the edges of their empty car seats as if they could sense the danger before any human could see it. He had calculated every second, every angle, every contingency. Protocol Lazarus was complete. Every loyal Moretti operative who owed him anything had taken positions throughout the city. Snipers, foot soldiers, armored vehicles, they were all ghosts waiting to strike at the command of the wolf. Luca exhaled slowly. This is it. No mistakes, no mercy, no delays. Isabella leaned closer, whispering, "Are you sure about this?" He turned toward her, eyes blazing. "I've never been more sure about anything in my life." The gates of the Valentino mansion loomed ahead, black iron teeth waiting to snap shut. Salvatore's shadow appeared at the center of the driveway, twins in his grip. They were blinking with red lights, the explosive vests designed to remind everyone that even a single misstep could turn the night into slaughter. Salvatore smiled, cold and precise. "You came alone," he said. "Exactly as I hoped." "Alone?" Luca's voice was quiet, measured, deadly, not even close. From rooftops, shadows moved. Hidden behind walls, alleyways, and fire escapes, Moretti operatives took their positions. The city itself had become a weapon, each footstep and each breath under his command. Salvatore didn't see them yet, but he would. The twins looked between their parents, terror in their eyes. Matteo whispered, "Daddy, are we going to die?" Luca crouched slightly, lips near his son's ear. "Not tonight," he promised. "Not ever, if I can stop it." Salvatore's grin faltered. Realizing that no fear, no threat, no hostage could bend this man, he raised the twins slightly, showing the world the stakes. "One false move," he warned, "and it's over." Luca's hand brushed against the hidden detonator cufflink. A faint click, imperceptible, yet lethal. Salvatore's eyes flicked downward, almost imperceptibly. He understood the risk. It wasn't just a bluff. "Enough games," Luca muttered. "Let them go, or you'll learn why wolves hunt in packs and why this one is the alpha." Salvatore's hands tightened, and in a flash, the first bullet ricocheted from the compound wall. Gunfire erupted, chaotic and violent, a symphony of death orchestrated by both desperation and strategy. Luca vaulted from the car, moving with fluid precision. Each step calculated, His body absorbed the cold, his mind absorbed the chaos. He ducked, rolled, fired. Shots rang out. Steel met steel. Flesh met stone. Every move was lethal, surgical, controlled. Isabella followed, pistol in hand, bullets finding targets with precision. The twins huddled between them, shivering, eyes wide. Red lights from the vests blinked in rhythm with their heartbeats. The snow turned red around them. Blood mingled with ice. Shadows became allies. Every corner an opportunity, every roof a vantage point. Luca leapt onto the compound wall, landing silently. Guards didn't hear him until he was behind them, blade flashing, one motion, two deaths. Isabella was a force of nature beside him, moving through chaos like she had been trained in war her entire life. Her eyes, once soft and warm, now burned with an intensity that rivaled his own. Salvatore moved forward, pulling the twins closer, but every step was being watched, every motion accounted for. Luca's soldiers emerged, masks of his face, creating illusions, confusion, fear. The real wolf had already slipped through their defenses. On the roof, across the driveway, a sniper aimed down, intent clear in the red dot glowing against Isabella's temple. Luca's teeth ground together. He signaled, subtle yet deadly. "Stay calm," he whispered to her through a comm link. "Draw fire if you have to. I've got this." Isabella didn't hesitate. She shifted slightly, pulling Salvatore's attention toward her. The red dot aligned. The sniper breathed. A shot rang out. Luca rolled through the snow, disappearing into shadows. In a heartbeat, he was behind the sniper, knife drawn, eyes cold, lethal, patient. One swift motion, one whisper in the ear. "Merry Christmas. Tell the devil the wolf is coming next." The sniper slumped, dead or incapacitated. The illusion shattered. The real war began. Salvatore's eyes widened. He didn't expect it. He didn't calculate for it. The twins were safe for now, clutching their parents, trembling but alive. Isabella turned, face streaked with snow and blood, eyes locked on Luca. "Are we done?" she asked, voice soft but lethal. Luca's smile was brief. "This is only the beginning." And from the shadows, every loyal soldier revealed themselves, masks of Luca, blurring the line between reality and illusion. The city had become a nightmare for anyone who dared threaten the Moretti family. The mansion was silent now, waiting, trembling under the threat of vengeance. And as the first light of Christmas morning began to seep over the horizon, painting the snow in pale gold, Luca knew one thing with certainty. The war was won for his family. But the underworld had no concept of mercy. Somewhere above, far away, a single sniper's dot reappeared, this time on the horizon, trained on the children, trained on everything Luca loved. Luca looks up at the distant building across the street. A red sniper dot glints in the snowlight, aimed at his family. The final war has just begun.